Good afternoon, everyone, and very warm welcome to all our participants to yet another interesting session today. Every day is a new day. Every day things are changing. There are so many sources of information which are coming in from all directions, on social media, on emails, on phones, and it's becoming confusing for everyone. And that is not something which is ideal, but we have to live with it and make sense out of all the information that we are getting. So this session is specifically around how to manage all the HR issues and what are some of the key guidelines. So our attempt over the next 1 hour is to try and help answer some of those questions at a macro level. As you are well aware, we are such a diverse country. 29, 30 states, union territories, different states have different regulations. Central government has been sending regulations, and every state has its own guidelines, etc., etc. So while it is not practically possible to answer every single question from every single state, our attempt is to cover those areas which are consistent and applicable to most regions of the country, and HR issues which are general and applicable to all segments of employees in any organization. So we do hope you appreciate that. And if there are questions or if there are changes which have happened between the time we put all this together and in the next 1 hour, obviously you have to put it with us. And please do continue to share your questions. And there is also a poll which we are, which will be launched. Please do answer those questions. And we look forward to having an engaging session. On that note, I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome Anjali, my colleague and friend, who will be hosting this webinar jointly. And well, let's kick off and just trust and hope that all of you are safe and your families are staying healthy as well. So on that note, Naveed, can we have the slide, please? So what are some of the key changes? Every organization has been going through and experiencing changes in the last month and a half. Some key areas as far as HR are concerned is the number of regulations that have changed around workforce, shifts, salaries, attendance and leave. All these are mandatory guidelines which are being which are being thrust on organizations, and nobody was ready for any of this. So each area is something that the government has mandated to ensure the health and well-being of all its employees, all the employees across different organizations, whether it is government sector or private sector. And it is important that all those guidelines are followed as applicable to each respective organization. And that is what we will attempt to cover today from a HR perspective. Naveed, are you able to show us the slide, please? So while we wait, Anjali, any thoughts from you to add on to what I mentioned?
Yeah, so, we're all aware that HR teams as well as leaders have a lot to manage during this pandemic. And everybody's making efforts for sure. So I just thought of sharing an interesting survey that I came across just this morning, where some of the major challenges that are being faced, again, by HRs, of course, and leaders as well, and the kind of importance that they have given to different facets of running businesses in the new normal. They state actually that, and this is what we're going to attempt to address in this webinar, is addressing employee concerns on workplace policies is as high on the ranking as 67%, and reviewing current welfare policies is around 50%. Interestingly, again, managing employee communication scores the highest at about 76%. So I thought these were interesting statistics, given that we're going to be handling this particular topic, and we've talked about it previously as well. But given that these are some some things that a lot of organizations are paying attention to. Once again, a disclaimer saying that from our perspective, we will try and handle the queries that you have and go through this presentation to the best of our understanding. Post which, depending upon any queries or questions that you might have, we will certainly get back to you on those as well. So that's something I wanted to share in the meantime, Sanjay.
So if you have any questions, this is to all the participants. If you have any questions, you can please post them there. And in the event that we are unable to answer those questions, we shall definitely respond to you over an email once the webinar is over. So please bear with us on that, because as you can understand, there are a few hundred participants, and it's going to make it difficult to answer every single question. Anjali, I think you can put up the slides because Naveed seems to be having a problem. So if you can just project those slides, that would be helpful. Sorry for the technological, challenge, guys. Apologize for that. Despite all our best efforts, sometimes, computers have a mind of their own, and the internet has a mind of its own. So it's not always possible to do that. Yeah, so if we can move to the next slide, please. So while we are waiting for the slides to come up, some of the broad areas that we will cover today are as follows. One is, what are the overarching guidelines that have been laid down with regards to layoff and refusal to work of employees. Second is around which are the industries which have been exempted from the lockdown, and what are some of the conditions, major macro level conditions that have been laid down for such organizations to operate. Third is around salaries and wages. What are some of the conditions around salaries and wages? There we are. So let me just take a pause. And lastly, since I was already mentioning that, let me complete the loop. What are some of the broad guidelines around taxation which have been laid down from an organization and employee interest? So going back to what I was mentioning earlier, these are some of the areas which every organization, irrespective of sector, has experienced. New welfare measures for employees on health, safety, transport, etc., depending on the organization. It's been extensive amount of communication that has been necessitated because of the situation. A lot of people, a lot of organizations have necessarily need to, talk to their employees and communicate constantly as to what is happening. There are actions which are concerns which have come up around salaries, around payments of salaries. How do you account for it? Because the first phase of lockdown started in March, continued in April. So how do you handle all that? How do you handle workforce because of social distancing? It's not possible even for exempt organizations to have the entire workforce to be present. So how do you handle that? What are the travel restrictions for employees? Work from home policies. I'm sure all of you have heard enough and more about that over the last 1 month, especially the IT and other services sectors. And what are the certain statutory regulation changes which all of the organizations have gone through? And we will take you through some of those some major ones, like I mentioned in the next 45 minutes or so. Can we move to the next slide, please? I'm not sure if it's Anjali or Naveed who is showing the slides. Can we move to the next slide, please? Naveed, next slide, please. Okay, this seems to be a very unique problem today, because over the last 4 webinars, we have not faced a similar situation. Okay, so meanwhile, yeah, there it is. So what are some of the things which are important for an organization to keep in mind based on all the changes that are happening? There are some common guiding principles which are required to ensure that an organization is continuing to operate, whether on premises or off the premises. When I mean off the premises, it could be work from home or remote working. Standard procedures for all activities, very, very important. Regular and transparent communication. Organization should take that effort to communicate and let people know, especially those who are not able to come to work, as to what exactly the situation, what's happening within the company, how is it, how are they handling the changes, what are some of the key steps that they have taken to ensure well-being in health, etc. Policy amendments regarding leave, attendance, working hours, payroll, very critical. Everybody is worried about what will happen to my salary, how will my leave get affected, what is it about, the future, job losses, will I get my salary, enough of it, more of it, less of it, I don't know. So all that is happening. And then there are, of course, daily there are guidelines which are coming from the central and state governments with regards to various aspects. And more importantly, as you can well understand, every organization has a number of stakeholders, whether it is internal or external. Employees is one set. Then there are partners, there are external partners, there are statutory bodies, there are government departments, there are customers, end customers, there are vendors, suppliers. So everybody needs to be constantly kept assured by the respective departments to ensure that, everything is fine, we will come back to normal, because this is not a problem which is unique to one organization or one state or one country. This is a global pandemic, as you all know. And so therefore it is important to ensure that everybody is kept communicating. Yeah, so let's get into more of the detailing with regards to HR perspective. And Naveed, next slide, please.
So interestingly here, Sanjay and I were also exchanging a joke about the connectivity issues these days. And so right now, if I look at what's happening in my home, there are 4 people on 4 different calls, remote calls. So there is a slight lag in for Naveed as well to change the slide. So bear with us, please. It's only because of the connectivity issue and not because of anything else. And just to share something on a lighter note, I think the other day when we were having a call, one of the employees' wives was asking the employee, "Cooker mein seetiyan kitni baji?" Was it two whistles in the cooker or 3 whistles in the cooker of the cooker? And one of our participants in the meeting that we were having said, "Bhabhi ji, it was 3 whistles so far." So all kinds of things are happening these days, and I would just like us to bear with some issues if we are having during the webinar. So thank you for that.
So I think while we are waiting for the slide to change, there are a couple of questions, Anjali, which you might want to start off with. So the first question is from Neha, and she says, as HR, there is a responsibility of making environment positive due to delayed salaries, appraisals, and no new opportunities during this pandemic. How can we fulfill such expectations of employees?
Neha, I think all of us who are in this, who are brothers and sisters in the HR fraternity, so to say, have similar questions in our minds. And just to give you a few examples of what people are doing from the point of view of keeping employees engaged more than fulfilling the expectations of the employees, because they can be sky high, is thinking of various alternatives in terms of reassuring and assuring the employees by being transparent, absolutely transparent in the communications and being genuine in the communications that we are having with our employees, 1. And 2, there seems to be a lot of ask, and a lot of people are feeling very happy when we are saying that, why don't you think of upskilling yourselves during these times while we take care of situations and issues? Because there are situations and issues which are pretty mammoth, so to say, in this extremely difficult and unexpected scenario. So I hope that to some extent answers your question. There cannot be one answer which will, we can satisfy you with, but these are some options that you can think of.
Yeah, I think we have the slide back, Anjali. You can start from there.
All right. So from an HR perspective, slide number 1 that we have up here talks about those industries and companies that are exempted from the lockdown and the guidelines. So I'm sure all of us, most of us are aware that agriculture and industries like pharma, oil refineries, milk and dairy products, rifles, etc. are exempted. And also that essential goods, manufacturing industry can operate at 50% employee strength for sure. So that's a guideline that we have received very clearly. And it is certainly mandated in these industries and manufacturing units that are operating that there should be a restriction, preferably on the number of staff that you're calling per shift. And we've seen these, we've personally, experienced this not only in manufacturing units, but also in retail units which are allowed to operate. There are staggered shifts that are being planned as well, and a specified gap so that the sanitization that is required at workplaces can be taken care of. So there's a specified gap between the shift changes that needs to be adhered to as well. And the sanitization, as I just mentioned, between the shifts, it is mandatory. It is a must do for all of those organizations that are allowed to operate. Again, most of us are aware that passes can be obtained for all employees who are scheduled to work, and it is applicable, it is mandatory again that all of us provide our employees with, the PPEs, the requisite PPEs in our organizations. The transportation that is also being provided to employees, it is preferred, and it is to some extent, I would say, mandated from a health perspective, that if you have a bus which is otherwise flying about 70 odd employees, then you ensure that that bus today runs with about 30 to 40 employees only, so that social distancing within the bus is also maintained and we're taking care of their health and hygiene. It is suggested that you consider paying some risk allowance to your employees who are attending duties at the premises during such times. And I think in Hyderabad, the municipal workers are getting about 100 rupees per day, as I understand. So that's a risk allowance that is being paid to them. I think that's a nice gesture, and organizations can also think about something such as that. So Sanjay, would you like to add on to this?
No, I think these are all major points which will stay for some time to come. But the only advice to all our participants, especially irrespective of whether you are in HR or business, is to keep constant track of what are the regulations which are coming out on a daily basis. Because almost every 6 hours, 4 hours, there is some change or the other. And states are taking a call. So let me give you the example of this. I don't know how many people are from outside of Telangana who are participating, but just to give you an example, the state of Karnataka relaxed guidelines from yesterday. And so this is the first, yesterday was the first day, today is the second day. They're actually observing as to how are things going to change and what is going to happen. So based on the observations, there could be changes which will be announced today. So it is very important for all of us to keep track of daily changes and ensure that those guidelines are, basically communicated to all and actions taken accordingly. Yeah. Move on, Anjali. We are on slide 2.
Yes. So this is, we're covering some points here which relates to, the layoff and the refusal to work by employees. So it is suggested, it is recommended certainly by the government authorities that employees cannot be laid off during the lockdown period in most cases. So certain states have issued communication also requesting companies to avoid layoffs during the lockdown. We all know the kind of challenges that we have to face, and hence I've seen letters from the authorities requesting companies to avoid laying off companies during this difficult period. And there is no discretionary guidance as such on specific sectors. So let us assume that this is applicable to all businesses. So this is being more humane than anything else. And like I already said, it is a request that is being made to industry leaders. As far as the standard guidelines that are being given, these are being given under the Industrial Disputes Act and the Shops and Establishment Act, and they apply to anything to do with work, layoff, etc. Now, if an employee refuses to come to work in an exempted organization, we've seen the list of exempted organizations, and if an employee refuses to come to work, the employer has been given the right to take appropriate disciplinary action in this case. And again, this comes under the acts that we have just mentioned. So an employee basically cannot refuse to come to work in an exempted organization. An employee can refuse to come to work only if their necessary health and safety precautions have not been adhered to as laid down in the various guidelines that have been issued. So only in this case, the employee can refuse, and in the absence of the necessary health and safety precautions, and if an employee is forced to come to work, only then he or she has the right to sue the employer. So an employee cannot refuse to come to work in most cases, and employer has the right to take disciplinary action in this case. And again, there have been a lot of debate and discussions around the contract laborers, and so as per the Contract Labor Act itself, the principal employer is definitely liable to the payment of wages to the contractor, and the contractor in turn must ensure that he pays his workers during this time. So that is what the Contract Labor Act clearly states. All right. So I'm sure there will be questions, discussions around this, and we will try to address those. But this is in a way the summary and the broad level points of what we mean when we say, or what the government directives are with respect to laying off of employees and employees refusing to work, and what is necessary to be done by principal employers as far as the contract laborers are concerned. So, Naveed, can we have the
Anjali,
next? Go ahead.
So if we can pause for a couple of minutes and take some questions which are related specifically to this.
Right.
There is a question which is being asked by Yashovardhan, and he asks, how do manufacturers make payment to contractual workers since we are currently under lockdown? I think my view of that is everything is electronic transfer these days. So from principal employer to contractor, I think bank transfers happen anyway. Contractor to the actual employees, I think more or less in most cases, bank accounts have been opened, etc., just to ensure that there is transparency. But in those cases where they do not have bank accounts, which I don't think may be too many, I think the opportunity is for the it again depends on whether it is an exempted organization or not. If it is exempted, I guess the contractual workers will be coming to work and they can get paid there. If that is not the situation, it is non-exempt and contractual working, then there has to be a workaround. So I guess they will have to send it to somebody and then hand over. Again, it's not one answer. It depends on case to case, situation to situation, depending on how many workers are in which location and so on and so forth. Anything specific that you want to add to that, Anjali?
No, I think what you're saying is right, because in most cases, actually, we've seen that even the contractors do have their bank accounts. And actually, that is what the law also expects, that, there are no cash transactions whatsoever. So I think if in any case contractors do not have their bank accounts, it is better that you advise them to open a bank account and transfer the money into their bank account. So I think that would certainly be recommended in such cases.
Right. Okay. So we can move on to the next one now. Next slide, Naveed, please.
So also, the banks are working with minimum people. So if you give a check, it is being honored. So I don't think that challenge will also be there.
Correct. Absolutely. So moving on to the salary. that is the biggest concern which
I think there is an issue with Sanjay's connection. So, Naveed, should I go ahead? Yeah. Okay. So I think what Sanjay was just about to say was yes, salaries and wages seem to be certainly on top of the list of concerns. So here again, when in this slide, which is summarizing the important points as per the guidelines that we've received so far, is that salaries and wages have to be mandatorily paid. I think about that. There are mostly no two opinions, and they have to be. So this is for the period of the lockdown, which is phase 1 and 2. For exempt organizations here, salaries and wages should be paid based on the actual attendance. So we are all capturing the attendance. We're all capturing the attendance and the leaves as well. So for exempt organizations during the lockdown period, it is recommended that salaries and wages must be paid as per the attendance captured. No specific guidelines, however, have been issued for salary payments in phase 2 of the lockdown, which is April 2020. So it is, as of today, which is the 24th of April, safe to assume that the March guidelines continue to apply until further clarification is received from the government. All right, so I think it's pretty simple that yes, do pay the salaries and wages for the period of the lockdown for sure, based on the actual attendance in the case of exempt organizations, and till we receive any other notification from the government, it is safe to assume that the March guidelines continue to apply. Now here again, for exempt organizations, refusal to work by an employee makes him or her liable to have a salary or a wage deducted for such absence. Okay, so if your employee refuses to come to work, then it may make him or her liable to have a salary or a wage cut. Now, payment of salaries in parts is not allowed as per the GO again. However, employee and employer may come to a mutual agreement whereby salaries in parts may be paid out. But as per the GO guidelines, this is not permitted. I'm sorry, but there is a suggestion from Svetlina to appreciate to answer the question. We will come to that, Svetlina, not to worry about it. Okay, we'll go through the presentation and then we'll certainly answer as many questions as we can. That's an assurance. So Sanjay, would you want to take over? I have covered till refusal by an employee to work. No, so not able to hear you, Sanjay.
The slide so that there is no lag in continuity.
Yeah. So payment of salaries in parts is not allowed as per the GO guidelines. Now, the employer has a right to deduct salaries of such employees who are unable to work from home or who do not come to work where such option has been provided. So the employer in this case has a right to deduct salaries. And then once again, we've not seen a specific guideline prohibiting employers from asking employees to go on forced leave, whether it is paid or unpaid. So there is no specific guideline in this regard. At the same time, during the lockdown period, any ex gratia payment which is to be made to any employees can be claimed by organizations as a CSR expenditure. All right, so I'm sure there are enough and more questions around salaries and wages. So
I think we should take a pause and answer them, Anjali, because there are a lot of questions that I'm seeing. So probably it might be worth it to spend 5-7 minutes to answer those questions. So if I'll just read out the questions so that we don't lose track. and then you can, answer them one after the other.
Sure.
So let me just go back to, there are actually quite a few flowing in. So let me just go back to the top and see how we can answer. So let's take up those which are salary related first. So I'm starting from the latest question. So this is a question from Smita. What is it about, I think there is some word missing there. What employees are asking about leave in this lockdown period, whether it will be paid or unpaid? This is the discussion that we were having in the morning.
Go ahead, Sanjay.
So the answer is that there is no specific guideline which has been laid down by the government with regards to how to treat this period of lockdown. Unless it is an exempt organization, there are 3 or 4 options which are available for an organization to handle this. If there is enough leave balance for the employee in the employee's account, an organization, of course, this is all in a policy decision between employees and the employers. One option is whether it will be adjusted against the leave or not is a decision to be taken. If it is not going to be adjusted against the leave, will it be adjusted against some future leave? Is something that an organization needs to take a call on. So there is no standard guideline which has been laid down for that. The third option is, in the event of leave adjustments not happening, then is there some kind of a minimum salary that an organization will agree to pay to each employee and then adjust it once the situation becomes normal. So there are different options which organizations are exploring, and that is because there is no one answer to this. Size of the organization, the financial position, the fund flow, the revenues, how badly is the industry affected, that particular business is affected. All these conditions come into play. So is there anything else that I missed, Anjali?
No, I think you've covered the 3 different scenarios. Yes.
Okay. So there is another question. This is another interesting one which has a similar answer. This is from Sonia Stick. And she says, even for the exempted organizations and workers on essential services, if they are not able to report to duty due to public transport shut due to national lockdown, or those with their own transport want to come but their housing societies are sealed. Very, very, very good question, Sonia. Answer is similar to what I mentioned to the question from Smita. There is no government guideline for this. There are 2 aspects. One is the business aspect. One is the aspect of humanity, which an organization has to consider. Everybody is going through difficult times, so it is not fair to just blindly deduct salary or blindly say that we will adjust it against leave or just say against future leave. It's not fair to do that. Therefore, depending on the organization's financial position and their leadership mindset, these decisions have to be taken. And it is because it is neither the fault of the employer nor the employee that they are unable to come. So each situation has to be handled differently. So if your organization is in a position to afford to be able to pay, fair enough. If not, to what extent can you pay? You want to adjust it against leave? It's purely an internal decision. I hope that answers your question.
Also, I'd just like to add one point here, Sanjay, which was, it may be, again, like Sanjay mentioned, it may be a little on the humane side to at least consider paying the minimum wages during this time, right? So that's something else which has been, So even the employee subsistence.
Correct. And there's another nice option which Venkatrao has given. I think what he has given a suggestion, or rather an answer of what his organization is doing. And he says 30% salary, it's a startup, and 30% salary cut for this month, considering the cash flows. And while they're asking their employees to work for only 4 days a week until the end of the month. So that is one option. It is suitable for their organization, but may
So I think the
to apply. So organization. There's another how it should be handled. It purely depends on each organization. Large automotive organization.
So I'll take it up here. I think Sanjay is. So Svetlina, I think your question to some extent has been answered. So while the business cash flows, this is not an exempt organization or industry that it falls under. We have to consider the humane aspect and do the best we can. Would be just my suggestion. It depends on the exact and actual situation that you're facing on the ground here. So that was Svetlina, and yeah, so there are a lot of requests for sharing the recording and the PPT. So on the Keka HR website, as well as on LinkedIn and YouTube, the recording will be available, because I suddenly saw 5 or 6 such requests. I thought that's an easy question to answer, so I can go ahead and answer that immediately. Yeah, so Sanjay, you're back, and I think let's go ahead and finish the presentation and then come back to the questions.
Sure. I think we just have one more slide, and then we can patiently answer all the other questions as well. Okay, next slide, Naveed, please. That will be HR Perspectives 4. So we will have enough time to answer all the questions. So that's a good thing. So this is the last slide for us to cover. Some statutory obligations. So with respect to statutory contributions like PF and ESI, the government has magnanimously announced that they will take care of the employer and employee contributions for the next 3 months, which is March, April, and May for certain establishments. What are the conditions of those eligible establishments? That the total number of employees should be maximum of 100, and 90% of those employees, which means if the number of employees are 100, at least 90%, 90 employees should be earning less than 15,000 rupees. That is the condition. So if there are only 75 people or even only 89 people who are earning less than 50,000, the organization is not eligible for this benefit. And also the dates for contributions to be paid to the government has been extended till May 15th. So that is obviously because of the situation and the difficulty with which even the government departments are not able to function full-fledged. So that is a relaxation and benefit which has been given by the government. And the date for filing TDS returns by the employer. So all the TDS deductions and then submission to paying to the government and then updating Form 16s to be issued to employees, that date has been extended till the 30th of June, which is usually the, I think 15th of April or so, generally, but it has been extended up to 30th of June. And last but not the least, linking of PAN and Aadhaar, which has been made mandatory at least for all the IT returns purposes, can now be done until 30th of June. These are some very, very broad guidelines. With that, let us move on to the questions. I think those are more interesting and more relevant. So I'm going to start from the top, Anjali. If I may take the liberty of asking the question and you are able to answer, that would be helpful. And if there are any perspectives which I miss out on, then we should be, I think we should be able to cover it between the two of us. So when I got cut off and came back, I heard you mentioning Svetlina. I think you answered the question already?
Yes, I did, Sanjay.
Okay, great, great. So here's a question, again, another one from Mahendra. And he says, can you please explain agriculture sector in detail? So can I take that one, if it's okay?
Yes, please.
So Mahendra,
Sure.
I think from our understanding, all those, first of all, I think the Rabi crop was ready to be reaped, and all the agricultural produce was to be reaped, collected by the farmers and sent off to the godowns, etc. So that activity has been put under the exempt sector. Subsequently, all those activities which happen after the farmers reap the crop, goes to the godown, gets bagged, weighed, put into the warehouse until they are able to transport it, and then the transportation of all those agricultural produce, grains, pulses, whatever, all that come under the agriculture sector. I hope that answers your question. And anything which is manufactured as an essential item, any food item, through produce coming from agriculture, that is also part of semi-agricultural but essential, like rice, wheat, etc., etc. So those kind of things. This is a question from Samir, Anjali. What about NGOs? Are they coming under any kind of exemptions? Not to my knowledge, but please answer if you have anything.
Not to my knowledge. Yes, not to our knowledge, Samir. No, they are not.
Next question is from Venkatrao. Before the lockdown, employee or contract workman absent for duty can be considered as absent for lockdown period? I don't think so, because whatever period of time before the lockdown that they were absent for, yes, definitely you can consider. But once the lockdown started, if they are absent, then unfortunately you can't consider that. This is not like clubbing weekend leave. You know, these are two different situations. So I think that answers your question, Venkatrao. Next is, Vikas Chandra. I think the answer is pretty simple to your question. Normally, we used to have appraisal during April every year. Same is the motivation to employees, but in this situation, how to motivate? Very difficult question to answer, my friend, because everybody is going through the same situation. So when will appraisals happen? Will I get my increment? मैं तो कह रहा हूँ बहुत सैलरी आ रहा है तो खुश रहो, अभी इंक्रीमेंट तो बाद में सोचेंगे. You know, so you will have to constantly, you know, give a positive hope that things will settle down in the next month or two, and appraisals will take place. Is the only answer that we can.
The only
Anything
point
else, Anjali, to that?
Yeah, so the only point I would like to add here is the appraisals or the increments are based on the goals that have been met in the previous year, which is 1920. So that point should definitely be considered. And of course, depending upon the situation that each organization is in, you know, right now, it can be deferred, but at some point in time, one, it has to be reiterated that we understand it is for the previous year, and we will go through the process and do the merit increments, etc., as and how it is feasible for our organization. So at least lauding them and applauding them for the targets, I think, will motivate them to some extent.
Correct. I mean, it's a matter of constant communication. Is all we can say for now, right? There is another question which says from Bhagirathi, and she says organization is supporting employees by not giving salary and giving full-fledged. Employees are uploading their CVs over Naukri and exploring jobs in the market. How do we tackle this?
That's a perpetual situation. It's I actually doubt it if the percentage in this case has gone up during this time, because, you know, a lot of organizations are talking about hiring freeze. In fact, there is a little bit of scare in the market that even those offer letters that had been given out by organizations may not be honored. Let's hope that that doesn't happen. But yeah, I mean, there is little that we can do from stopping employees uploading their CVs. What is it which is in our control is what we should focus on and do that in these difficult times. I think my recommendation would be that.
Correct, absolutely. And Dr. Nandish's question is interesting, but I guess the answer is well. So let me read that out. Central and state governments plus industry bodies are advising against layoffs. Well noted, but some employers are tactfully asking employees to resign. how to deal with this unethical HR practice on part of employers. Well, Dr. Nandish, it's you use the right word there, unethical. Ethics is something which cannot be taught. It has to come innately from every person's mindset. And as we all know, in a diverse society like ours, this is something which is very difficult to control. And unfortunately, neither does the law enforce you in any way to make sure that such things don't happen. Broad guidelines are given, but especially in this difficult situation, it depends. So unfortunately, we don't have any specific law which states you can't do that. It has to come from the heart, as I'm sure you understand. Right? Next question, Anjali, is from Neha. Probably you can take this.
The only addition to to Dr. Nandish's question would be that there is a procedure laid down under the Industrial Disputes Act for layoffs, and so while it cannot be brought into force during a time such as this, I hope the employers that you are referring to are aware of this and do not get into any trouble otherwise.
Correct. So another question is, in the construction industry, the productivity, the output is not as expected as in a normal situation, but salaries are kind of getting paid, but staff are still getting motivated because not everybody gets paid on the same basis as in a normal situation. How do we tackle that? So any thoughts on that, Anjali?
No, I'm sorry, I got a little distracted. Construction industry. So again, I think it's again similar to Svetlina's question, if I remember the name correctly, because again, it's about not being able to lay off during this period and being and considering the minimum wages possibly as one alternative. So it is ensuring that we all in some way or the other get out of this difficult phase without too many bruises. So possibly that's what could be considered in an industry such as that also.
So Sujata Singh has a question. She says, my organization is planning to deduct 50% salary of all employees for April. What steps should I take?
So Sujata, we've been discussing this. We've been discussing this, Sujata, quite a bit with a few other folks in the industry as well. I think there has to be an agreement between the employer and employee before a step like this can be taken. I think that's important. So communication again is necessary. And so the government departments are also doing that, as again, most of us would be aware. They're saying that right now we will only pay 50% of the salary. The remaining 50% will be deferred. So what's the decision of your organization has to be communicated to the employee, and an agreement between the employee and employer should be reached.
So there was another question. I remember the question, but I'm missing who asked that. But the question was, how can we track the location of the employee? So the answer to that is very simple. If you do not have an automated attendance tracking system, then it's very difficult to track that. If you have an automated HRMS system and it is geotagged and the GPS location with an app available on the phone, then you can make it mandatory for employees to log in from wherever they are, and you will be able to track their location and the time they spend at that location. But if there is no automation, then there is really no way that you have to go by trust. That's all you can do, right? Then I'm just moving ahead, and I'm trying to, the system is a bit slow, so I'm just saying. Neha's question is, what to do if the employee has not been provided salary just because she is under first month's probation, will it state under company's favor to declare it as layoff, or what could be done in this case? I think, Neha, the same rules for any regular employee apply in this situation as well. Probation or not, it is important that the person gets paid, right? Because he or she has worked during that period. If the company decides to lay off that person, again, like Anjali just mentioned, all those rules of layoff, whether it is shops and establishments or industrial disputes, will get applicable here. They cannot just take a random decision. That being said, if there is some unethical practice where the organization forces the person to resign, that's a difficult situation to handle. It's not fair. But legally, no, that is not possible. Is it, Bhaskar asks, is it mandatory for the organization to pay complete salary to permanent employee? By government regulations, Bhaskar, yes, it is mandatory. Is there an understanding between the employer and employees to say that, you know what, you know the difficult situation that we are in, we'll pay you part of the salary now and make an arrangement between them internally? The government does not prohibit that from happening. But if you strictly follow the letter of the law, the entire percent salary payment in parts is not allowed. As you might remember, we covered in HR Perspectives 3 of that slide, right? Then we have, what else? Hotel industry, Svetlina's question you answered already. Bhagirath's question we answered. Then we have, I'm just moving a bit slowly, but Sanjeevani has a similar question around performance appraisal and uncertainty due to COVID. Again, very uncertain times, Sanjeevani. We cannot give you a standard answer for that, because some organizations which had already finished their performance appraisals before March, they were lucky, they got away with it. Those in the process of doing it have put it on hold. Those who have not started at all have a completely different approach and say we will see when, as and when the situation normalizes. So that is what we can answer for this now. BV Rao has a question around what would be the challenges for restart of operations post lockdown in the manufacturing industries. I think, Rao, you must have already noticed that some states have relaxed the lockdown and they have laid down guidelines depending on whether you are an exempt industry or non-exempt industry. If you are exempt, there are very clear guidelines given as to how you can, on what basis, how many people can work, what shift, how the shift timing should be staggered, what health regulations you should be taking by providing all the personal protective equipment, take temperature, sanitization, etc., etc. Those are the conditions. If you're a non-exempt industry, then nothing much. It is it will open only once everything is normal. So there won't be possibly any regulations immediately applicable, at least not announced as of now. So that's the answer that we can give you right now. Then what else? So let me just keep moving. Can you explain a bit more on the ex gratia payment and the CSR? When the CSR expenditure was a question. So the answer to that is, if any payments are being made to employees over and above their regular salaries as a risk allowance for coming to work, or an allowance which is a special one-time allowance for these difficult times, whether for 1 month or 3 months, only such expenses are allowed as CSR expenditure. If you spend for charity by distributing food or water, or provide some transport to not your employees but unknown people, etc., such kind of expenditure is not to be treated, will not be allowed as CSR. So I hope that answers your question, right? Then what else do we have? Questions are flowing in. Rest assured, guys, to all our participants. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, there is a question from Aisha which says she runs a government school and has been asked not to take fees How do we pay the teachers? So actually, Telangana government specifically, I believe, has said, you can take the tuition fees, maybe not the entire fees, but do not increase the tuition fees. I think the kind of government order reads such as this. So you can actually go ahead and take the fees. The request is not to increase the fees. I hope, Aisha, that answers your question. And yeah, Sanjay, as you were saying, we will definitely ensure that we answer all the questions, even if not during the live webinar. You will definitely receive personalized emails from us answering any questions which may get left out. So be rest assured about that.
For those who attended the last 3 of our webinars and had a question which was unanswered, you might recall that I had personally responded to each of those questions and sent out answers. So rest assured, you will get an answer from us, because technology, time, and the fantastic, engaging conversations that you guys are having with us is giving us a lot of excitement, and that all of us are in the same boat. And our purpose of doing this is to help all of you, and by way of that, also learning from all of you as to what are the different situations that you guys are facing. So we'll be more than happy to answer. Rest assured on that. So I'm seeing some engaging, answers on all the poll questions. So Naveed, I just want to know: are all the participants able to see the answers? Results are public. Okay, fantastic. So all of you are able to see and probably gain some relief and confidence in how many of us among the entire audience is going through similar problems, right? It's not only one person. So all of us have questions. All of us may not have all the answers, definitely. So we will keep doing that. We have run out of time. So probably in the interest of time, we'll just take 1 or 2 more questions. And because of the rate at which questions are pouring in, the screen is changing almost every second. So I'll just pick up whichever question comes to the screen first. Venkatrao has another interesting question, Anjali. Can someone advise, as per the above circular, is it mandatory to take insurance coverage for COVID-19? All our employees are covered. All employees covered except ESI. So I'm not too sure what that last statement meant. But is it mandatory to take insurance coverage for COVID-19 is the key question. Anjali?
No, I don't think there is any mandate such as that from any government authority. It is, if you can, why not? Would be what I would say. Yes, and it will certainly help the employees feel really good about themselves and the organization. I just want to state a few things here.
Yeah, please.
Go ahead, please. No, go ahead, please.
No, go ahead. I just wanted to tell Venkatrao, if your organization is ready to spend and take that, you will find more loyal and more trustworthy employees who will be very happy to be with the organization. That's all. Absolutely.
So just one quick question from Neha, which is very appropriate regarding salary slips. So, payroll has to be processed anyway, Neha. So payroll has to be processed on the basis of attendance and decisions that you will take about the leaves. So in view of the statutory regulations, when you're processing payroll and paying salaries, you can definitely, there will be no problem in actually giving the pay slips also. So that just ensures that there is transparency. So, I think it'll be a good idea to not only pay as per the attendance, but also give the pay slips. And I just wanted to call this out, Sanjay, that, while we're talking cost cutting, layoffs, etc., I think we should also appreciate, and I'm sure all of us who are on this webinar will appreciate the fact that the employers and organizations themselves are certainly going through a lot of problems. So we, in our individual capacities, have a lot of issues to deal with, but so do organizations and the employees. So given that, one, there is a legal aspect and a government directive that we are all trying to follow, but please do not lose out on the human aspect. So that's something that I wanted to call out for sure. and say that examine everything, look at everything by ensuring that you do look at it from a humane angle. I'm sure all of us know that, but just reiterating that fact was something I wanted to call out for sure.
So using that same analogy, there is a question from Karthik, last question which I would like to answer. Karthik Shetty asks, is it okay to exit an employee if at all there has been concerns on performance? Karthik, the answer to that is yes, absolutely. If you have solid evidence that the person's performance has been not up to the mark, you can do that. But from the human side, remember, this may not be the right time to do it. The recommendation is please wait until the situation normalizes so that it doesn't backfire on the organization also. The perception in the minds of employees would be nobody will think about the actual reason. They will just say the person was terminated because of it's a layoff and has been removed because of the COVID situation. And so more job losses are going to happen. So all those kinds of concerns will come up. So the recommendation is to just wait until situation normalizes and then do what is best based on all the evidence that you have. I hope that answers your question, right? So guys, on that note, I think we are forced to stop. We would have loved to continue for at least another hour to take all the questions, but unfortunately we are not in a position to do that. But just to give you a transparent and honest answer, every single question from every single participant does come to us, and that's how we go through and respond to each person. So make sure that you have your email ID listed when you have registered for this, and you will get an answer from us. So on that note, we hope that all of you continue to stay
Sanjay,
safe, take care of your families,
we should mention.
Yeah, please go ahead, Anjali.
Yeah, so, I just wanted to also mention that all the points and other questions that we've tried to answer are based on this special, unique, I don't know whether special is the last word, unique, unforeseen situation that we're all in. And it is based on the Industrial Disputes Act, the Disaster Management Act, and of course, after we've tried to capture the best practices in the industry. So just wanted to make that clear as well.
And once again, if you guys have or your organization needs any help on any of these areas, please do reach out to us. You are able to see our contact details on the screen. And a sincere thanks from Anjali and I to all of you, because I just saw, do you like the webinar, the question which came up, and 95% of you have said yes, to which we all have to say thank you very much. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Bye-bye now.
Bye. Take care and stay safe.